So I'm bringing us back, sort of using this. The reason that this queer theories, the queer ecologies, and sort of critiques of environmentalism, all the stuff that I'm trying to introduce to you, the reason it goes so well with this idea of the Anthropocene is precisely because the Anthropocene is so dense, right, and terrible, right? It's such a situation of so much density and toxicity and no escape, right? Think about all of the science fiction narratives. Think about Blade Runner, right? You guys know Blade Runner? Some people, maybe. If you haven't seen Blade Runner, go watch it and then go watch it again, right? Not the 2049, not the new one, the one from the 70s, right? The Ridley Scott film. In Blade Runner, the rich people have left the planet. They've gone off planet, right? Who's left on the planet? The drug dealers, the hookers, right? The criminals, the cripples, all the sick people, all the disabled people, all the kinky sex people, right? All the freaks are there on planet Earth together. Right? And that's kind of an Anthropocene imaginary. Here we are all together, all deeply imperfect. Maybe Elon Musk can afford to go to another planet, but right now he's probably the only one. He'll go there, he'll drive his car around. But until we can all go, we're down here, right? We are the freaks who are down here. That's the idea. You don't have to believe me, but that is these are the ideas I'm trying to bring to you, right? Okay? You guys ready for whales? I mean, obviously. All right, so I want to talk about, I'm going to use this word, cetaceans. So let me show you. Okay, I'm going to use this word cetacean, so don't read this yet. Okay, this is the word I'm using to refer to this group of marine mammals. Okay, so cetaceans basically means whales. When we talk about cetaceans, we mean whales. But whales include dolphins, which I'll explain here. So cetaceans are divided into two groups, okay, two subgroups. The ones with teeth, right, the toothed whales, and the ones with baleen. They're the ones that don't have teeth. They've got that filtering mechanism, right, where they can take in water and filter plankton and other small animals, right, through it. Okay? So the odontocetes, which are the toothed whales, include dolphins, orcas, porpoises, beluga whales, and sperm whales, right? Moby Dick, he was a sperm whale. They communicate by means of clicks, squeals, squeaks, and whistles. Some of you, if you're like a dolphin freak like I am, you've been listening on YouTube. And if you're not, you will be after tonight. They use a form of sonar called echolocation, right? In which high-frequency clicks bounce off objects, right? Which then allows the whales to see underwater, right? So they click, the stuff bounces back to them, the sounds bounce back to them, and that's how they know what's out there. Okay? Echolocation allows odontocetes to see, because they're seeing with their eyes, right? They're seeing with their ears. It allows them to see in actually a great degree of detail. So some of their sounds we know are echolocation sounds, but not all of them. The rest of those sounds are communication sounds. And we know that they're communicating to each other, but we don't know exactly how. I mean, we don't know at all, really, to be honest, how that works. Okay, so that's your odontocetes. Mystocetes, the baleen whales, humpback whales, the blue whale, which is the largest animal ever in the history of the world, which is alive with us right now. I mean, it's not in this building, but it's pretty close by. They're out there in the Indian Ocean. It's pretty close. Gray whales, right whales. These whales do not echolocate, okay? They don't make the clicking sounds. They don't echolocate. Instead, they make low-frequency sounds that communicate over enormous, enormous distances. And they even pass around obstacles, around physical obstacles. The patterns of these sounds repeat, which causes researchers to group them with other song-like behavior, like that of birds, right? So this is where we can start talking about something like whale song. Okay? Unlike the toothed whales, baleen whales have vocal cords. Okay? And baleen whale songs constitute the largest communication network for any animals, with the exception of humans who, you know, have some help. Okay? So here are some examples. Here are your basic odontocetes. I just pulled random photos off the internet. A dolphin here, narwhals, right? Beluga whale. The sperm whale. Okay? The sperm whale has the largest brain of any animal in history, as far as we know, right? The largest brain of any animal living, and I think any animal at all, ever, over time. The largest brain. And, of course, orcas. Okay? And then your mystocetes. The humpback whale, gray whales, they're the ones that tend to be really covered with barnacles, right? Gray whales and blue whales. Okay. So I want to say a word about, there is, how do I even begin? So that was just in order for us to get a little bit of the sort of taxonomy geography, right? Because I'll be using these interchangeably. I'll be talking about dolphins, I'll be talking about different kinds of whales, right? And I'll be using this word cetacean also. So let's go back. I'm just going to close this door because it's stressing me out. The feng shui is not right. I have to close this. So I want to start the story by talking about, I want to take us back to Bermuda in the 1950s. There is there was a Navy engineer by the name of Frank Watlington, and he was working for the US Navy on Bermuda. And Bermuda is on the way, right, of the humpback migration. It's an island on the way. So Watlington is a Navy engineer. He creates recording technologies, right? He creates microphones that he then lowers down, right, into the ocean so that he can record the sounds of dynamite exploding underwater, right? So like the Navy is, I don't know, they're setting off dynamite underwater for some reason, I don't remember why. And his job is to create a microphone that will record these sounds. So he does this, he records, he records and records and records, and one day he gets a different kind of sound. He realizes that these must be whales, and he contacts cetologists. Cetologists are whale scientists. He contacts them and says, hey, I have something you're interested in. I've got these recordings of humpback whale songs. Actually, the story is a lot cooler than this. Can I tell it to you guys? All right. So I just want you to imagine, like, it's the 50s, it's Bermuda, it's rich white Americans in Bermuda having, like, really nice parties, right? And this guy usually has people over for square dancing. Do you guys know what square dancing is? No, you shouldn't. Square dancing is like, it's like American country dancing with like couples, and then you trade partners, and it's like sort of folky and jumpy. You know, it's not like nice, beautiful, graceful dancing. It's kind of this goofy dancing. So he has people come over for cocktails and square dancing on a beautiful, you know, usually on some beautiful Sunday afternoon. And one day, these people come over, and instead of the normal square dancing music, he plays them these whale songs. So this is my favorite part of the story. I tried to imagine these, like, you know, nice, very, very proper, wealthy people confronted with these sounds for the first time. Because really what happened at that moment, at that very moment, for the first time in history, right, people were listening to whale sounds on a recording. That had never happened before. Before that, the only way that you would have heard, that humans would have heard whales, right, was in the context of ancient sort of whale hunting societies. They might have occasionally heard whales through the ice, right? Or in their boats, if they were way out in the ocean, they might have heard the whales underneath the boats. But it was very rare. So suddenly, whale song enters the living rooms of human beings, right? And you don't even have to live anywhere close to the sea to realize that there are these sounds, right, being made by these animals. So, Watlington's recordings are then released on this album called Songs of the Humpback Whale in 1970. Okay? It's an LP. Songs of the Humpback Whale becomes one of the most important oral documents of the modern environmental movement. And let me explain to you why. In 1972, the Save the Whales campaign, Christine Stevens, who is the originator of the Save the Whales campaign, appears before the US Congress while the US Congress is debating the Marine Mammal Protection Act, right? Should there be a protection act, should there be an act protecting marine mammals? And the way she sort of wins the debate, let's say, is just by playing the recording. She plays the recording, and then everybody signs on the dotted line. Okay? In 1975, a young, new organization called Greenpeace performs their first act at sea, their first action at sea. They go out to sea, and they confront a Soviet whale hunting vessel. What do you think they do? They play the record. Right? One ship plays the record to the sailors on the other ship. Right? Like, hey, stop, listen to this. Okay? In 1979, over 10 million copies are inserted into the January issue of National Geographic, which makes this the largest single pressing of any album in the history of recorded music. Right? Now, why is this important? It's important, especially if you realize, when we realize how a massive an industry whale hunting was, right? Up until the mid-20th century, whale oil, right? Whales were basically considered giant reservoirs of oil, swimming reservoirs of oil. Whale oil lit the streets of every major city in the world, right? Up until the middle of right before this, right? So, I mean, the massive whale hunting industry is like 19th century, right? It makes up a big part of the US economy, whale hunting, right? But it continues, whale hunting continues completely unproblematically until the mid-20th century. We don't start talking about banning it until what is known as the Stockholm Conference. The United Nations, so 72, the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, also known as the Stockholm Conference. It's the first time that the United Nations declares environmental damage as a global phenomenon to be addressed collectively by nations. Okay, so we have the beginning of a kind of idea of shared responsibility, right? Here begins the ban of commercial whale hunting. Okay, the moratorium on whaling, this is called whaling. I need you guys to stop talking, okay? Thank you, because I can hear you. Thanks. The moratorium on whaling, proposed by the US right after the US passes the Marine Mammal Protection Act, is adopted here by total consensus. Right? So by the time we're adopting the moratorium on whaling, there's no controversy anymore. In '82, the International Whaling Commission institutes a global ban on all commercial whaling, which goes into official effect in '86 and holds to this day, right? So the same ban that's in place today, we began talking about it in '72, right? With the help of this record, with the help of those recordings taken by Watlington. Japan, Norway, and Iceland are not compliant, right? They continue to, Japan continues to hunt whales. They say it's for reasons of scientific research. No one believes them, right? Norway and Iceland don't even pretend that it's for scientific research. They say they are interested in eating, they eat whale, right, historically. But we're not just sort of making indigenous rights claims here, right? That as nations, they are allowed to serve whale to tourists. That it's a big part of their tourist industry is that you can go to Iceland and you can go on a whale watch and then you can eat whale for dinner. Okay? Yeah, somewhere I read, as I was researching this, somewhere I read something like, whale all lubricated all of our machines, which literally made the Industrial Revolution possible. It's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so much for that. A little bit of history. Now, I've got some quotes here from the book Cosmodolphins. Here's where we're going to get into the weird stuff, which you know I love. Because, of course, it's the 1960s, which means it's weird. Things are weird right away. Dolphins, they're a little bit cosmic. Crystals, you know, some LSD, some rock and roll, you know, the crazy stuff's going on. Free jazz, oh my God. Like just I mean, people are having sex, craziness, right? So they talk about, in this book Cosmodolphins, they talk about this connection, right? That something is happening in the 60s where we're looking at space exploration, right? At the same time that we have a kind of fantasy of a different kind of social organizations or utopian fantasies, right? And at that same time, we become super interested in dolphins and whales. By accident? Probably not, they say, right? So here are their quotes, right? The dolphin becomes a sort of spiritual doppelganger, or what they describe as a new noble savage figure. They are bearers of, we imagined that they are bearers of alternative values, such as collectivity, compassion, friendliness, creativity, joyful sexuality. They have a lot of sex, by the way, dolphins. Androgyny, spiritual wisdom, and intuitive intelligence. This is how we imagine them in the 60s, right? The whale would allegedly guide us to insight into the true and sacred pleasures of a simple life in harmony with the natural environment. And when do we have these kinds of fantasies? When this is not available to us anymore, right? That's how it happens. So, the nostalgic imaginary of post-industrial culture, longing for an alternative world where the wounds inflicted by the destructive logic of present-day social relations between humans, technoscience, and nature are healed. A world in which humans no longer seek to profit from the technoscientific control and domestication of nature. So, again, I am back to this idea. That was pretty great, huh? You want to see that again? I don't know how to do it again. I'm sorry. I can only do it one time. Right? Because look at what so already by the 60s, of course, right, we are stuck in this destructive logic of shitty social relations and shitty relations between humans, technoscience, and nature. How can we heal these wounds? How can there be a better world? Dolphins seem to know something we don't. Right? They are intelligent, they are promiscuous. Do you know this word, promiscuous? Who knows this word? What does it mean? Well, sexually active, but like loosely sexually active, right? Like, woohoo! So it's a little bit more than just sexually active. Like, it's a very... Right, we describe dolphins as promiscuous. They have a lot of sex. They have a lot of sex with different, they don't mate for life. Okay? They are, they seem better than us somehow. Okay? Now, this gets quite literal. The work of John C. Lilly. John Lilly is the person who in the 60s took the project of communication with dolphins very seriously. This is the most serious long-term investigation into the possibility of talking to dolphins. Okay? I actually wrote a book about this, and so if you're interested, we can do a whole conference just on this, or a whole class just on this, but I wanted to just tell you a little bit. What's interesting about Lilly was, as he was doing all the dolphin experiments, he was also very interested in the burgeoning conversation around extraterrestrial intelligence. And he attended the Green Bank Conference in 1961. That is the conference that everyone now says that's where SETI began. SETI is the American organization Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Okay, so that the logic of SETI, the plan of what it would mean for humans to really systematically and committedly try to make contact with another intelligence begins here. Lilly is there. The group decides, as a kind of joke, to call themselves the Order of the Dolphin. Okay? Fast forward to 1977. NASA launches the Voyager probes, Voyager 1 and 2. The Voyager probes are still going, right? They're still out there. They have now left our solar system. They are in interstellar space. Okay? It will be 40,000 years before they make a close approach to any other planetary system. So you got to wait, guys. It's going to be a while, right? On the Voyager probes, there is this thing called the Voyager Golden Record, which is an LP, because it was the 70s, right? It's vinyl. I mean, it's gold, so it's not actually vinyl, but it's an LP. And it includes the songs of humpback whales. the same recordings that Watlington took in the 50s off the coast of Bermuda. Okay? The humpback songs are included as part of the human and whale greetings section. We are talking about sending greetings to the aliens, right? So you've got a section where there are, I don't know how many languages, I don't remember, but they're all spoken by UN delegates. So it's one person after another person after another person saying hello in their language, and then when the humans are done, you get whales. Okay? Here is what the golden record looks like. And this is a beautiful quote from Sagan's book, Cosmos, where he's describing how he imagined this, right? It is, as much as the sounds of any baleen whale, a love song cast upon the vastness of the deep. Okay? So, all right. How are we doing so far? Great. Are you guys sure?
Yes.
Yes? Is there anything I can explain to you? I'm going kind of fast. I'm moving. We're taking a crazy ride through history. Is there anything, can I help you with anything? Don't just let's just keep going. Crazy ride. Okay. All right. So notice what's happening in the 60s and 70s. You've got these currents happening at the same time. You've got a serious investigation of the idea that there is another intelligence here on Earth, and a serious investigation of the idea that there is another intelligence out there in the cosmos, and we are going to talk to it. Right? These two things are in the culture at the same time. Right? Now, dolphins and whales, let's say dolphins, are not the only animal that humans are trying to talk to at this time. This is Washoe, a picture of Washoe the chimp. Washoe was, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the ape sign language experiments of the 60s and 70s, right? That there was this moment when there was a lot of funding given to this. Washoe was the most successful of these, in the sense that not only did she learn, I don't know what the number is, some vast number of signs, right, that she learned to use, but she taught them to her child without being prompted to. So it was the first and I think the only time, right, that we know of that something like sign language got transmitted from one animal to another, sort of spontaneously. Okay? So we've got Washoe here, a quote from a Harvard psychologist. I don't know who this is. Roger Brown. He said that watching her sign was like getting an SOS from outer space. Then we've got, famously, Coco, the talking gorilla. Coco died just recently, right? So I'm sure some of you who are Coco fans, like myself, right? Gotta love Coco. October 1978 issue of National Geographic. Talk about the spectacular and highly mediated relationship that humans have with themselves. Right? This, for me, is one of the great this cover is one of the great documents of that idea. There she is, holding a camera and aiming it back at you. Right? So here's Coco, the gorilla. She also learned a bunch of signs. But this whole project ended with this case. This is the case of Nim Chimpsky, named after linguist Noam Chomsky. Nim was the first chimp, the first ape in this experiment scene to be taken from infancy, right, They took him as an infant, took him from his mom, and gave him to a human family in a house, right, to raise as their child. So he was raised as whatever that means, right, as a human child by a normal suburban American family, right, who also spoke American Sign Language, right, and could teach it to him. So the idea was to not only teach the being, the creature, right, sign language in a laboratory experiment, but to actually connect all of this with just sort of normal life as much as possible. There were a lot of problems around Nim, and in the end, actually, I would advise you watching the documentary about him. I don't remember what it's called. I think it might just be called Nim. I don't know. I'll find out for you. But in the end, after being with him for decades, right, his keeper, this psychologist, Herbert Terrace, decided that he wasn't really speaking. He wasn't really speaking, by which we mean, right, Herbert Terrace at one point decided that all of these, he said, were cases of just animals mimicking humans. That's all it was. End of experiment. All the funding gets pulled on this kind of science, right? We think that at this point we thought that we had sort of answered this question conclusively. Animals do not use language, or at least apes do not use sign language. They're just doing what you want them to do so that you'll give them a treat, right? The story is quite tragic. Nim ended up, in like some kind of zoo, and it's terrible, the whole thing. So, what interests me about the contrast between this science and the dolphin science, right, is that the reason that this science got sort of shut down was because it was decided that the apes were not curious enough. Basically, right, they weren't asking people questions. So they would learn these signs, and that would be it. Like, I would make a sign, and then the ape makes a sign, and then, we laugh, and it's fun. I make another sign, the ape makes another sign, and that's it. And the scientists wanted to have a conversation. The apes did not. Right? So one of the reasons that this gets shut down is because the apes are not interested enough. Right? It's literally, it's a problem when we talk about spontaneous use, right, of signs. It's as if the apes are not invested enough in the project. Now, when you look at all the literature on dolphins, what's happening is exactly the opposite. So the dolphins don't use sign language, obviously, right? But there's a constant sort of insistence that they are so curious about us, that they're so interested in us. So at the same time that you've got this research shutting down because of a lack of curiosity, you've got the other research continuing, right? At least, I don't want to say thriving because it wasn't thriving. It was never thriving, right? But it's continuing using that same currency, this currency of curiosity. So I'm interested in this value of curiosity, right? I'm interested in why that matters to us so much. What do we, again, talking about the spectacular and highly mediated relationship humans have with themselves, right? What are we getting from this idea? It may be correct. I'm not saying it's not correct. I still think it's a fantasy, but that doesn't mean it's not true. What do we get from this fantasy that dolphins and whales are so interested in us? So the question, right, do cetaceans speak? right? Do they speak? Because with apes, we're sort of unsure, like maybe they were speaking, it's unclear, and then this guy decided that they weren't speaking, we pulled a funding goodbye. But we're still kind of holding on to this idea, right? We're very much holding on to this idea that whales and dolphins speak. I want to tell you a little bit about sort of research around cetaceans. What kind of a creature is a cetacean? When we look at how we classify cetaceans, the most important thing about them is their hearing mechanism, right? So what you're looking at here is the Basilosaurus. It is a prehistoric animal, obviously. A dinosaur, I mean, I think they thought it was a reptile for a while. It's not a proper dinosaur. They thought it was a reptile for a while, and then eventually it was classified as a mammal, right? It was classified as a prehistoric mammal on the basis of its hearing mechanism and its inner ear bone, I found out. So this is sort of a proto-cetacean. Look at the CET, right? A proto-cetacean. But the real proto-cetacean is this guy. Yes. Pakicetus, because his bones were found in Pakistan. Okay. I like to think of him as a semi-aquatic pig dog. This is considered the missing link between terrestrial, between land and sea mammals, right? This guy at some point went into the water and then at some point didn't come back out, right? So this is now considered, there's consensus that this is the sort of the most original whale. Based on the structure of his inner ear. Okay? So even though all this other morphology is just normal pig dog morphology, right? The inner ear is such that we know that it, I don't like saying it. Is it a she? I don't know, I can't, it's unclear, right? That he has the right skull and the right hearing mechanism for marine mammal hearing, right? So today, we know that dolphins have a capacity to hear and classify sounds in noisy environments that is still unrivaled by any human-made listening device. So militaries would like to have listening devices that are as good as dolphins' ears, but they don't, right? The echolocation system is also still to be matched by any machine. There is no machine that can do it as well as the dolphin. But all marine mammals have really acute hearing. I just really like this picture. That's a sea lion. So the question is, do they have language? And how would we know? How do we start answering this question, right? Do whales have language? So here's what we know so far. Humpbacks live in pods, and the pods seem to be communicating in idiolects. Do you know what this word means? What do you think it means, idiolect? Some kind of language. This prefix idio, what does it mean? Idio. When do we use it? You guys use it. When do we use idio? Idiot, right? Idiot is a good one. What else? Idiom. Idiom, right? Idiom. What's an idiom?
Language in Spanish.
Language in Spanish?
Academia de idioma.
No. No. But idiom, what is it? What does the word mean?
Phrasal verb. Phrasal verbs. Idioms.
Another meaning?
Of some words.
Another meaning of some words.
Maybe a set phrase.
A said phrase?
Set.
A set phrase?
What's up? What's up?
A common phrase. Yeah, so when we talk about idioms, right, we're talking about phrases that people use commonly, right, but only specific people in a specific context, right? So it's used commonly by these people. So the idiom, what the word idiom has to do with idiot, I will explain to you, right? The word idiot actually originates in ancient Greece, right? And it's the notion. It's the person. The idiot is the person who didn't go to the marketplace, right? Who didn't go to the agora. The agora was the place where all of not only commerce took place, but all of political life took place. That's where the Greek citizens went to vote, right? That's where they went to have legal battles with each other. The agora is where all public life, and so therefore representing yourself as your speaking self is what happened in the agora. The idiot was the one who didn't go. Right? I'm fascinated by this figure of the idiot, right? As this person who stays inside, right? Stays quiet and doesn't participate in public life. So it's only now that we think that that is the person who is stupid. But this word stupor, which means muteness, right? So we associate this sort of lack of speech, this idea that the speech and intelligence have something to do with each other, inner life versus public life, right? So, idiolect, right? An idiolect is a language, right, that's specific to the group. They speak it, the others don't speak it. Okay? Humpback pods seem to be communicating in idiolects, unique sound patterns that do not get repeated. A big difference between humpback whale songs and bird songs. Every pod has a unique pattern of sounds, right? The pattern, right, does not get repeated. The whales in one pod sing the same song, which changes over time. This is what I mean by it doesn't get repeated. Changes over time in pitch and sometimes volume. Whales in the same area tend to sing the same song, but humpbacks elsewhere sing completely different songs, and patterns are not revisited over time. So we've been studying the humpbacks for 19 years, right? Or one study has been continuous for 19 years, and they have shown this. So the particular songs on that record, Songs of the Humpback Whale, never appeared again, and probably never will. So that recording that we have is the only recording that we have of those songs, right? So it seems as if humpbacks have discrete shared songs that evolve over time, just like human language. Now, so much for the humpbacks. Now, what about the odontocetes, right? What about the toothed whales? Unlike humpbacks, who live in loosely knit transient groups, orcas live in very stable pods. Each pod has its own dialect. Although pods associate with each other frequently, individuals never change pods. They never go from one to another. So dialects are strictly maintained. In other words, there is no one language that could be called orca in a way similar to how there is no language that is called human. while behavior and social organization indicates that linguistic communication is taking place within particular groups, just like with humans. Right? So we have different languages. They are not immediately translatable into each other. I mean, you have to kind of work, right, to translate. And yet, everyone seems to be speaking. Sperm whales are now thought to exhibit similar diversity among dialects to orcas. As with orcas, we still understand very little about how this works. But dialect is so central to sperm whale social life that scientists refer to the sperm whale social unit as a vocal clan, a group that can sometimes number in the thousands of individuals. Okay, so that's what we know so far, in case one of you was going to ask the question, so do they have language? I don't know, right? There's kind of no way to answer this question. What we know is this stuff. This is the stuff we know. And once you know this stuff, the question, do they have language, kind of falls away. It's kind of the wrong question. I don't know. They have this. And that's kind of enough for us to have something here to study, right? Okay. Now I've talked a little bit about the curiosity stuff, right? We talked now about the language stuff, and I want to make some connections between those two things. So, going back to those Arctic societies that hunted whales, right? Remember I said that they could hear them through the ice, or they could hear them through their boats. The way that this worked was that not only did these societies assume that, of course, whales had language. Of course, whales were talking. They weren't, but let me start this over. Not only did they assume that whales were talking, obviously, but more than that, they assumed that the whales could talk to them. Right? That this was a completely normal part of life, and other animals too. Right? But whales specifically, it was absolutely obvious and true that whales talked, and that it was possible to talk to them, and that communication with them was an essential part of the hunt. Right? So I want to read you guys a quote from an article that went viral in the States right before I came here, actually. It's called When Whales and Humans Talk. While Westerners domesticated and eventually industrialized the animals we eat, and thus came to view them as dumb and inferior, Arctic cultures saw whale hunting as a match between equals. Bipedal humans with rudimentary technology, right, like a harpoon or some kind of spear, faced off against animals as much as 1,000 times their size that were emotional, thoughtful, and influenced by the same social expectations that governed human communities. In fact, whales were thought to live in an underwater society paralleling that above the sea. Throughout history, similar beliefs have guided other human-animal relationships, especially in hunter-gatherer cultures that shared their environment with big, potentially dangerous animals. Okay? So, and we've seen a little bit of this already, how the human-animal relationship was once imagined very differently, right, than it is now. So because whales could talk to us and hear us, we did, by we I mean these Arctic people, right, did things like, they had rituals of quiet, for example. You had to be quiet so that the whales would come. Because if you're talking too much, then they won't come. So that the whales would come and offer themselves for the hunt. There were rituals of quiet. There were, from what I understand, there was people would make like amazing amulets and talisman and things like that that they would put down into the bottom of the boat with the hopes that the whales could see them, right? So it was all about, so what we're talking about at this point is not just communication in the sense of like, you know, us writing text to each other on our phones, like some people are doing right now, for example. It isn't just communication in this kind of cold, impersonal way. We were talking actually about attraction or something like that. We're talking about having to bring the animal here, having to make it interested enough, right, so that it comes here so we can kill it. But it's got to come here. Because look at us, we're just like little monkeys with spears. Like loud little hairless monkeys. Right? So, so I think when we're looking at something like this, we're already sort of back in this sphere of curiosity. We're not just talking about communication, we're also talking about, I use this word attraction. I know you guys are all freaked out. Everybody's like, oh my God, she's talking about having sex with whales. Not exactly, okay? Not exactly. But I'm using something like attraction as a kind of thing to explore here. Remember Timothy Treadwell, your friend? Remember him? Okay. So curiosity. So this idea that cetaceans have this innate interest in humans, right? It fuels the whale watching and swimming with dolphins industries. Okay? Laws like the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Fisheries Act restrict how closely humans and vessels may approach the animal, but not vice versa. So all these laws say you can only swim up with your boat this close. So you swim up there with your boat and you sit there and you just pray that the animal will come closer because you're not allowed to, right? But if it comes closer, I don't know, it just happened, right? This means that the only way to get close to a gray whale, or swim with a dusky dolphin in open water, I'm not talking about when we swim with dolphins in like, you know, pools, right? Swim with a dolphin in open water is if the creature freely approaches you. So the new research that's happening right now, that's about talking to dolphins or talking to cetaceans, is happening in the wild. So this is really important, right? It's a big difference. We're no longer talking about dolphin research in tanks. The research is in the wild, and it's really banking on this idea that they're super interested in us, because they've got to come to us so that the research can happen. So it's really banking on this idea. And I wanted to show you guys the two main projects. One is called the Wild Dolphin Project, and they're using a technology called chat to record and catalog the entire, they're hoping to have a catalog of all dolphin sounds, which they will then feed into some sort of supercomputer, and what will emerge is dolphin language. And then there's a thing called Darwin, which I'll tell you about. Okay, so this is the website of the Wild Dolphin Project. I just wanted to show you this idea, right? In their world, on their terms. This is important, that it's sort of, that they're not in captivity, right? Again, wilderness. Here's the website for Darwin. So Darwin is a sort of independent group of a whole bunch of people. And the thing about them is that they free dive. So notice that this person is not wearing scuba gear. Because apparently, when we swim up to sperm whales with scuba gear, they swim away. But when we're not wearing scuba gear, they don't swim away. Right? One of the reasons they swim away is because, again, remember how acute their hearing is. They can hear that scuba gear. So without the scuba gear, they don't swim away. And so for the first time, right, in history, we've got these underwater encounters between the hairless monkeys and enormous pods of sperm whales. I mean, it must be quite exhilarating. I can't imagine what it's like. They are free diving, right? But notice the language, notice the ideas here. We are not alone. It's pretty extraterrestrial stuff, right? We're back to extraterrestrial stuff. They describe themselves as an international group. Wait, I can show you this. Yeah. They describe themselves as an international group of audio engineers, scientists, cinematographers, authors, freedivers, and ocean lovers who believe cetaceans have an incredible capacity for intelligence and communication. The project is unique because the team is freediving, right? And this is just a quote from one of their divers who happens to also be a journalist, right? He says, "As I stared into the tennis ball size eyes of a sperm whale mother and calf, I immediately recognized that these were extraordinarily intelligent, fully conscious beings. I believe the whales saw the same in us." This is the last part that I'm very interested in. I believe the whales saw the same in us. So, if you want to go join Project Darwin, who does? Anybody? No? Of course, hello. I think it's very expensive. I think this group, it's like they forgot to put in the part where they're also billionaires. Like, I don't know if this is real or not. But, you know, today in the world of fake news, it just doesn't matter. Because even if it's not real, it's still circulated and it still forms the imagination, right? It forms the sort of shared experience and shared imaginary. But it could be real. I would let my child kiss a beluga whale, absolutely, right? So what we're talking about here is I'm trying to fill out this concept that we use often, right? It's called, the concept is called charismatic megafauna. We often talk about large wild animals using this term, charismatic megafauna, and it means these, you know, these animals that we become very invested in protecting, right? Conserving their habitats. Think about rhinoceros, giraffe, right? Think about whales are a great example, right? Humpback whales. I don't know. Tigers, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to fill out this notion of charisma for us, right? Why is it that we're so drawn to these animals? What are the fantasies at work here? Because charisma is one of the passions that power conservation. Okay. So we've got this sort of fascination with these animals. We're pretty sure they're fascinated by us. We sure like to think that, right? And it may be true. So there's this desire to get closer and closer. There's this desire to get closer and closer, to communicate, right? To understand each other. And at the same time, here's our Anthropocene again. Oh, I should have had it spin around again. That was really good. Our Anthropocene, right? What are the Anthropocene conditions? There's too much stuff. There's too many people. We're too close to each other, right? This is how we imagine environmental crisis, that it's this density, right? Excess, density and excess. And indeed, it would be a mistake to consider the Save the Whales campaign a success. Because even though we stopped hunting whale, right, we stopped hunting whales. We're still messing up a lot. So this is the Baiji River dolphin, which used to live in the Yangtze River, right? It has been declared functionally extinct. It is the first, hold on, I want to get this right. It's the first cetacean species to have gone extinct as a result of anthropogenic factors. Right? As a result of human activity. The first cetacean species to go extinct as a result of human activity. And it's the first megafaunal species to go extinct not from hunting. Right? I think there was, recently I saw something like someone might have seen one. But this is the point of this category, functionally extinct. It means that even if there are individuals still around, they're not going to make it. This is how these things get categorized, right? So these guys are more or less gone as of 2006. These guys, this is the river dolphin that lives in the Amazon, and actually they live all over they live in more than one. No, it's in the Amazon. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, it's not the same animal, right? This is the river dolphin that lives in South America. And they actually number in very high numbers. Here's the weird thing. We still consider them vulnerable, even though there are such high numbers of them. We still consider them vulnerable because the habitat encroachment that's happening, right? Because of what's happening to the Amazon River basin and what's happening to the rainforest. We know that when these guys go, it's going to be really fast, right? So they are actually considered data deficient, which is fascinating to me because there are so many of these, and yet we consider them data deficient, right? They're classified as data deficient because we can't figure out what their vulnerability status is because there are too many factors in place. And we know that their habitat is in such danger. So these are interesting also because I read that they live about 30, 40 years in the wild, but they are basically impossible to keep in captivity. They die within, I think the longest one lived was 33 months, or maybe that was the average age for how long they live in captivity. So that's how, and breeding in captivity is absolutely not an option, right? So this is another reason that we know that we will lose them. Even though we have such high numbers, we won't be able to, there's no way to keep them going without habitat, right? Without their natural habitat. So river dolphins, all of the species of river dolphin are now considered threatened. Okay, river dolphins are freshwater animals. And they are also blind, basically, because the rivers that they live in, like the Yangtze or the Amazon, are so murky, right? The waters are so, you know what those rivers look like. The waters are sort of muddy and yellow, and you can't see in the water. So they have extraordinary hearing mechanisms. So since hunting whales is against international law, the biggest threats to cetaceans currently are indirect. We talk about incidental mortality, right? So you die incidentally, right? They are killed sort of by accident. Incidental to climate change, human encroachment on their habitat, Bycatch from fishing is a big one. That's how they think that the baiji, the one in China, that's what they think happened to the last specimens, is that they just kept getting tangled in fishing nets. Bycatch from fishing, right? And for river dolphins, deforestation, destruction of rainforest, and noise. And for the ocean cetaceans, the biggest killer, right? The biggest problem that gets in the way of their life to the point of killing them is noise. The noise is from Navy sonar testing and shipping, because 90% of the world's trade is carried by ship. How are we doing? I'm sorry, I always have such bad news. I'm sorry, guys. It's a class on the environment. The news is never good. How are we doing? How about some questions? Yes, please.
Going back to this ape story,
Yes.
I wonder about this question. Could it be the level of intelligence that has influenced the interest of humankind in the dolphins rather than the apes? Because as far as I know, the dolphins are supposed to be like more intelligent rather than the apes. So maybe could it be the influence that people know that dolphins are like more intelligent creatures?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer this. I mean, I think this is another difficult question. When you listen to and read testimony by people who have worked closely with great apes, they would absolutely reject this, right? They would say, when you have this kind of relation, there's no question about intelligence here, right? So maybe American Sign Language isn't the way to go. But the problem is not a lack of intelligence, right? And in fact, they would argue, I think a lot of these people would argue, that what you have is a creature so highly intelligent that conditions of captivity, right? Conditions of being taken away from its habitat, taken away from its mother at an early age, all of these conditions are so destructive, right, psychologically, that of course you have a weird situation. Precisely because we're talking about creatures that are so sensitive and so intelligent. I don't know. I'm not an animal psychologist, right? So I don't have the answer. I like this answer, the one I just gave you, because, you know, animals. So I like this answer, but I actually don't know. It's a weird question, right? Who is intelligent? Or what is intelligence? I mean, I don't want to say, I don't know, so it doesn't matter. But at the same time, you know, it's probably the sort of question that we should keep asking, no matter what answer we get. It's going to be hard to arrive, it's too complex an idea, intelligence, for us to arrive at a conclusive definition of intelligence where everyone's going to be like, okay, done. No more talk about intelligence because we have an answer, like 2 + 2 = 4. Intelligence equals blah, right? It's not going to be that sort of thing. And in fact, arguably, it's when we try to interact with different intelligences, whether they are of another species or of our own species, right? When we try to interact with different intelligences, we keep learning more and more about what intelligence is or could be, right? Yes, please.
I wanted to say there were experiments with dolphins, especially in the Soviet Union.
Yes.
In military forces, they had a lot of experience with them, and actually the reason why these studies were stopped because dolphins were too much smart.
We're too smart.
Too smart, yes.
Fantastic.
Because they stopped talking to those
I love this. Thank you so much for that. I didn't know that, but
I can tell you more.
please, yeah, no, I love this. I think something, you know, more or less similar happened in the US. Like, we just sort of reached certain walls with this. And at a certain point, you know, I also read a lot about how boredom is a serious problem for dolphins in captivity, right? Depression, boredom, precisely because they're so intelligent. And then you put them in a tank and make them swim around. I mean, anyone would go insane. Like, what are we talking about here? If we take this intelligence claim seriously. Yeah. Yes?
Well, it's not maybe a question, but I'm just thinking, well, the idea is fascinating. Let's learn how their language works.
Mm-hmm.
There is a language. Then, okay, let's imagine we did that. And so what are we going to tell them? So what's the ultimate idea? What are we going to communicate? Or maybe they just want to say, like, guys, leave us in peace. That's it.
I know. Yes. Did you guys hear Anya? Yes. You did? Yeah, she's basically saying, what if we do learn how to talk to them? What are we going to say? Maybe they'll just tell us to go away, right? Yeah, no, exactly. What would we say? It's interesting to read Carl Sagan on this point because he had to make this record to send into space. So he had to answer this question, what information do I want to give extraterrestrials? Possibly in the distant, distant future. What is the story that I want to tell them about us today? Right? So he had to answer this question. How he decided to answer it was very interesting, right? I think it's super cool that he sent whale songs. I don't think we would send them today. Right? If scientists were making that same document today for like aliens, I'm not sure that whale songs would accompany the United Nations delegations of greetings. Right? So to me, just speaking as myself, right, I feel like we've lost something, like we lost some kind of, I don't know, magical curiosity or desire or imagination, something that we lost a little something that was valuable, right? Because now we would send them like, I don't know, Google. Look, guys, look at what we have. We have Google. But we wouldn't be sending them like, we have whales. Look at this. We have the biggest animal that has ever lived in the history of this planet. And it's just swimming around out there right now, talking. Look at this. So guys, you know what I want to do now, right? Is it obvious? Yeah. Can we do it? Yes. You've been waiting for it. Should we turn off the lights? Yeah. Okay, guys, somebody do it. Somebody deal with it. Anyone, please. I don't think Katya's here. I don't think anybody's here who can. Oh, yeah, this is killing. Oh, wait, hold on. So I'm going to play the first track on this, which is called Solo Whale. This is the LP, right? So you're going to hear cracks like from a record. It's not the CD. This is the LP. And at one point, you will hear the dynamite. Because remember, that's what he was putting those microphones down there to hear. Oh, shit, sorry. Wait, what just happened? No. Guys. Hold on. Man, I really know how to kill the mood, huh? I just wanted to turn it up a little bit. Okay, let's turn this down and start. Okay, again, that didn't happen.